Welcome to the second Alchemer training for the LHD Academy of Science. We got Mike here. This is a three-part training series. Hopefully you've been able to watch number one. We want to first again thank the state of Kentucky and Elizabeth and Carrie for fulfilling with the NACCHO grant to make this possible for all AOS members to be a part of this and get in some in-depth training. So without further ado, we'll switch it over to Mike and continue on. And me and Elizabeth will be in the chat if anyone needs anything.
All right. Thank you, Jake. Nice to see a good number of people showing up, which is awesome. Just as a way of introduction, if you weren't here for the first training, my name is Mike Cronley. I'm the training specialist and onboarding analyst at Alchemer. And my background is in customer support, where I worked for 2 years. So looking forward to today's training. Had a chance to touch base with Elizabeth to do a little game planning and try to highlight some specific requests for features and how to use them effectively. Looking forward to covering those, and just a general continuation of where we left off in the first hour of training. So we got past build and a little bit of testing. So we'll go through kind of the other steps and kind of progress along the path of distribution and looking at some early results. We'll see how much time we have, but just to continue on that journey of the full flow of launching a survey and getting the results. But let me start sharing my screen and we'll jump in. And yes, ask questions anytime. Happy to answer in the moment. So appreciate any questions that you have. Okay, so I wanted to maybe just kind of cover the topics that came up as individual items. So I want to make sure I cover those first, and then I'll kind of go into a little bit more of the pre-planned agenda as far as topics to cover. So one is text and translations and how to set it up for success and how to build a survey with a translation. So I am going to just create a really short survey as a example. So I'll just call this my translation demo, start building. And I'll just add one question to have something in the survey. You know, what is your age? And then I'll go to the common answer library for quick fill-in for demographic data. So I have, quote unquote, the survey built, which is actually true. I could send this out. But now I want to translate this to a different language. So I'll go to tools and text and translations. And the first thing is basically leave this English translation alone. This is kind of the standard, the default language, and just problems that I've seen in customer support where people jump into the English translation and try to translate the English, but that's the foundational one. So we want to kind of leave that alone. And then we'll go into here, add translation, and then we'll pick our language. And this is a step that has to be accomplished. And one of the great things about our platform is when you go through these steps and set up translation, our system will recognize the computer setting of the person who is taking the survey, and it will switch the language automatically to display that language that's in the translation. So I was going to go through to get to Spanish. It's taking longer than I thought. Let me get to Spanish United States. Great. So now I'm clicking add the language. And just to give you a sense of navigation, because sometimes you get lost in apps, at least I do. I'm like, where am I? Back to all translations. You'll start to see your list of translations. Okay. So now I'm going back in to edit and do the translations for Spanish United States. And the fastest way is to do an export of the build of the survey, which I'll show you in a second, send it to a translator. They'll translate it in the CSV Excel sheet. You get it and you do the import and the mapping. But let me just show you kind of the manual step of this. So I'm translating this survey. So I want to translate this question, what is your age? So I'll click the edit pencil, and this is good. Translate question 1, what is your age? So I'm just going to put SP as the example. I would, in the real translation, I'll totally swap this out with the Spanish version of what is your age. And then the other is I have to change all the answer options too. So I'll just put SP to show the effect when I demo the output of this. So in essence, I've done a quick translation of the survey. So I'll save it. Okay. So now the survey's translated, and the ability for the respondent to select their language, I think, is a good thing to offer to the respondent in case what's being presented on the screen isn't really the language they prefer to read the survey. So the second step I recommend is going to Tools and Response Settings. Then there's a Survey Toolbar checkbox, and one of the options is Language. So selecting this opens up the ability to put in a language selector bar at the top of the survey for the respondent. And I could change the position, but I think the top is good. So I'll click Save Settings. So now I have a translated survey in Spanish, and I'm going to give the option to the respondent to pick if the system isn't showing the one that they like automatically. So if I go to Share, whenever I'm testing anything that's a little bit more advanced, like text and translations, I think it's really good just to start from the share link as far as that testing protocol. So I'll go to Share and View, and then this is the effect. So my computer is saying English is your default language, so we're going to render the English version. But up in the top right, I can choose as a respondent to say, you know what, I actually would like to read in Spanish. Spanish is my native language. So I'll click Spanish. And this is kind of the proof of that translation is coming through. So I did change the text for this survey, and that would be Spanish if I was really doing it, right? In our documentation, I know this is a little bit of a gray bar. It's not really prominent to see it right away. In our documentation for translations, there is a way to do a little bit of copy and pasting of some basic code where you can make this highlighted a little bit better. The other option is you can put in the build of the survey, a really quick, maybe I'm inserting a text media element. And this would be, hey, if, pick your language, top right, just a quick message that is like visible in that beginning of the survey, and just kind of cues them into the ability that they could translate it to the language they'd like. Let me show you the sheet option, which I think is probably the best path to do this work. So if I go back to Tools, Text and Translations, I showed you kind of the manual version. So now I want to go through what I think is probably the most common use case and the fastest. So I'm going to export the fields for translation, and the build of the survey is kind of generated. And then I'll download this and open it up. And the sheet that is generated, I have to try this again. There we go. Okay, when you first see this, it is overwhelming, like what is happening here, just the way it comes out. So I just wanted to show you these 3 columns that I think are helpful to understand. So the first is our system generated kind of codes, which you just don't have to really worry about. And then there's a second column is the default text. So leave this column alone. So we'll just these first two columns you don't have to adjust. The third column is where you do the work. So I would like to translate this. So I'll make that Spanish. And I go through the whole build of the survey and I'm translating this column. There is quite a bit of system generated messages that could potentially show up. So all this bottom rows, I might not have a save and continue in my survey. So I wouldn't need to translate all of these. So I think a path to take is, let me just use the sheet and I'm going to translate the questions, maybe some of the basic, like a required, if validation type of messages. The rest I'll just leave alone. Then I will save it. And then I'll do the import. Let me see if I can just do this quickly here, live. So I'm going to save this on my desktop. And just have it available. And then I'm going to go into the import. So I'm going to import, choose the file, and I'm going to source it from what I've saved in the translation, bring it in, and then I'll import. And then I should see some of those questions that I added more of the SP to, which was this one. So I've done that, and it's really quick, right? Nice to do. Then I would go in and I would really test the survey to see if any of those system generated messages will show up in the Spanish version. So I'll go to view and I'll go into the Spanish and I'll test it. And if there's a validation that shows up and it's like, oh, I forgot to translate, I'll go back in and maybe do that manually in the messages section and just kind of isolate those ones that could potentially show up. It just depends on the build of your survey and the question types that you have. I think in summary, it's the key things that I've seen as far as problematic that has come up is, just leave the English alone. When you're translating and you're adding the language, stay in this column, the translation column, when you're doing the CSV Excel, and then everything should work really well. This is where you can toggle to go to the specific, hey, maybe the translation for the next button. I would like to have that there, survey close message. So all these things you can customize, toolbars, reports, all these things you can tweak, but it just depends on what you have in the survey build and what you'd like, what could potentially be displayed to the respondent in that other language. I'll pause there for if there's any questions on the text and translations.
Mike, can you talk a little bit? We have some of our templates already translated, and one of the things that I know users have reached out to me on how to prompt it to show in English or Spanish without the bar. Could you walk everybody through that real quick?
As far as like a build in the survey itself, where the respondent would like answer a question to say, hey, I would like to take the survey in a different language? Or is it?
Well, like right now it's set to default translation in English. But if you
Yes.
are sending it out to all maybe Spanish speaking and you want it to go in Spanish first, you would just adjust that to your default translation.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So if they need to run a survey that's with multiple language speakers, that's not the right word, but you know what I mean? You're sending it to a bunch of people, maybe you've got Spanish and English and French and German and whatever else. Is there a way that they can send that same survey out with different default translations, or is it only the choice of the toggle bar at the top?
Yeah, so let me show you. Great question. So I'm going to the share tab and we have something called a tracking link. So I'm going to go through that path to make Spanish a default link. I'm switching it. So I want to leave kind of the primary link up above the same, So I'm going to call this my Spanish link just from a management perspective. And I'm having trouble here. So this is Spanish. So this link right now, I'm going to share this out specifically to that audience because I know they're Spanish speaking. So this is a Spanish link. So one thing, and this is in our documentation, is kind of a good practice. So I could make this, is called the slug, which is at the end of the URL for the survey. So I could make it SP or Spanish, just to designate it as flagged for that. And then under the advanced options, right now it's not going to show. I need to do this second step. So I need to go to advanced, and the language is auto. So that's going to automatically show the default setting on the computer. But now I'm going to force it to be Spanish. So this is going to be kind of hard coded to show Spanish right off the bat. So if I save this link, then I have a unique tracking link set up just for the Spanish audience. And then when I share it, I grab the link. And you don't have to customize that slug. That was just kind of a, if you'd like to. And I'm copying this. Now I'll distribute this link. And then when the respondent clicks on it, that audience, then the Spanish version will appear by default. And then they could, you could remove this bar if you know, if you're like confident, there's no, this is really going to be Spanish only. So this could be taken away, but here you could go back to the main link version, which is English. So that's the kind of the step, is creating that custom tracking link, and going to the advanced tab and designating it to be that language. And that could be, multiple. You could have, German, French, Italian, lots of these. So you just create those unique links. The word of caution is just be sure you're confident that the link you're sharing is the appropriate kind of audience for that language, if that makes sense, because you don't want to share the Spanish default to the the wrong audience as far as language. So did that answer your question? I didn't know if there's any other questions about kind of settings.
There's a great question from Rebecca Korn, and I was actually going to bring this up. It says, if you have a Spanish language translation on your browser is set to that language, will it appear in that language? And Alchemer that was one thing that Chrome, Firefox, all of the main browsers, what did this start like 6 months ago, where they just automatically, they have a translate button. My wife is from Uruguay and her native language is not English. When they did that, it does Russian, Chinese, and everything as well. So is that translation always going to be live on Alchemer survey, or Alchemer integrated into those browsers? Do you know?
It should. And I don't have enough firsthand experience with a different language, but the tech behind the scenes will should the appropriate language by default. And that's in this very beginning step of text and translations, going back to the very beginning. If I just pick, kind of a random language, this is the moment where the system knows Dutch, add the language. And that is captured in our data. And when the respondent gets the link to the survey, their computer says the default language for this computer is Dutch. The survey will show the Dutch translation automatically. And yeah, so that's pretty nice. It's just kind of operating behind the scenes. But again, I think it's nice to kind of have that option in the back pocket for the respondent, just in case. It's not like, oh gosh, like if I got Dutch by mistake, like, okay, I'm kind of lost. Oh, I have the choice to switch it to the language I prefer. So that's just kind of recommended step to give the respondent that ability to switch it, just in case.
I just checked Microsoft Edge, Chrome, and also Firefox all do it. And I checked on all three and you guys are compliant with all four. So that's good. I just checked on that.
Okay, great. All right. There's not any further questions, text and translations.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? I got one more question for you.
Sure, sure.
So I use this is Darrell from Ottawa County in Michigan. We use have used a number of different platforms, and one of the platforms that we use has the ability to actually translate questions within the tool. So instead of having to export and then import, we can do like side by side, and it has the option of using it has like a Google plugin, so you can translate right in the survey. And the benefit for this has been, we still need to do some cleaning to scrub the Spanish so that it fits the local dialect, or sometimes the translation is imperfect, but it saves us time and money because I don't have to have someone translate from the raw. So I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Does Alchemer have some sort of internal plugin that allows for translation within the tool?
And is this for you as the builder of the survey, question by question translation, or is it more on the respondent end?
No, it's actually built into the survey. So you can translate the entire survey within the Alchemer tool. I'm sorry, within the other vendor's tool. You see the English and you see the, say, Spanish side by side, and you hit translate. And then Google will translate the question and give you the narrative for what it interprets as the appropriate translation, and then embed it in the survey. So that I believe there's two options. You can use Chrome to switch languages, or it will put a drop down in the survey and you can choose the languages that has been translated into within the tool.
I'm not familiar with something along those lines in our platform. So I would have to look and see and do a little investigation to see. But as far as I know, I haven't heard of that or seen that as a feature in our platform.
Very good. Thanks, Mike.
Okay. Just like going down this advanced path a little bit. So one of the things that you can do, so I'll just add like a text media, show if this, just anything. So I'm saving this, and you can use the language setting behind the scenes to display elements within a survey. So in our, let me just get to the text of this, translate Alchemer, display, let me see if I can find the right, I don't want to go too far down this, but essentially there's these 2-letter codes for each language. And I think I'll experiment here, but essentially I only want this to show if, and you're using a URL variable, and the variable name is, that's where I have to reference our help document. I'm not sure if it's SP is exactly equal to, so there's a way to kind of create this variable that's based off of the language code that will only show this if that language is present, if that's the one being displayed. So you can really customize this. This is really going very advanced very quickly. And I apologize for not having this prepped and ready to go. But basically we capture the variable of the code, and then you can set up this logic to only show this if that language is present. So you can really do some customization based off that. I'm not sure if that's going to be helpful in your context, but that's something else that's available that's you can do. So okay, next one. If there's no other questions on text translation, I was going to move on to randomization, but just wanted to pause just in case any more questions. Okay, so next question was on randomization. So I will, I'm just going to add in another question. So I'll remove this text media. I'll add in a second question, and I'll just, an action question. I'll just do a checkbox and put in something kind of different. Maybe race, and I'll save. Okay. And what is your BT? Right. Okay. And apologize for misspelling. So now I want to show you 3 options for randomization. So first, why randomize? So depending on the question type and the answer options, there's this thing called bias. So in this example, I probably don't want to randomize these answer options because it is sequential. So I wouldn't want to randomize these, right? But maybe like in this ethnicity race question, you don't actually, these are really bad examples. I apologize. Let me just build in something new. So I'm going to put in kind of a checkbox, and this is more in the lens of like, hey, what did you, like at Costco, what do you buy most frequently? Kind of question. And, it's like, paper towels or eggs, they're just random things, right? Or milk. So I don't want this bias effect. I don't want paper towels to be shown every time to every respondent because we're human and we're kind of lazy. Oh yeah, paper towels, click. This becomes something that could skew the data. And it's like, well, maybe it isn't the most common thing. Maybe way at the bottom of this checkbox list, there could be 10. So I want to randomize the display of these options to make sure the data is clean and good. So I go to edit, and then under, let me see, validation, logic. Maybe it's layout. Depending on the question, these tabs change a little bit. So here under layout tab, it's randomize the options, and I'll save this. And then as I go through, so I'm just going to kind of reference this as paper towels is first. I think it'll work in preview mode. Let me just check. So I go through and there's paper towels. Let me see if there's a selection here for randomization. Let me try it again. So there, it kind of flipped. So now paper towels at the bottom. So that's just automatically flipping it for every person. But the data will still come through in that sequential order of the build as far as an export of the raw data and the reporting end. So that's one example. Inside the survey itself, I can randomize questions on the page too. So if I insert a page break here, so this could be, the welcome message, and I start the survey. If I go to the pencil icon, I can go to the layout tab, or this is the example, it's a little different where it's located, but I can shuffle the order of the questions on this page for each respondent. So then maybe what is your age is going down at the bottom. So I'm flipping the question order sequence of how it's being presented to a respondent. So that's a second randomization option. And the third is maybe it's pages complete. So I have one page asking these questions. Here's a second page, and I'll just put this in as kind of example, page 2, just to label it. Then this UX, you have to go to a different location, and I could go to tools and randomize pages. And then I could select, I haven't titled the pages, that's why it's showing a blank. So this is my welcome page, this is page 1, page 2, save. And as someone goes through the survey, the pages will flip-flop. And it's like, it doesn't really matter what order they appear, but I just want it to be random. And the whole purpose of randomization is just to minimize bias, to get better data that's clean over a bigger number of respondents. So, okay. Any questions on randomization and the options to set or to take away? I think in general, just as like kind of like a summary for what I've seen, I think for checkbox questions, I think it's really good. When there's a list of, hey, what are you familiar with, or what do you notice, or we have a lot of customers who do marketing and it's brand awareness. Hey, which brands are you familiar with? And it's like Honda, Toyota. Honda shows up at the top. It's like, well, I'm familiar with other brands too, but people are just kind of lazy and they'll click the first one kind of thing. So that I think is a really good use case, is a checkbox, multiple select, just presenting different options, randomizing the answer options. So any questions on randomization? Okay, all right. The next thing on the list was
Sorry, I was muted. It says, what if you want to randomize all answer choices except the preferred not to answer or other, since you would want those at the bottom? Is there an option for that?
yeah, it's a great question. So so if I go into edit here and I want to shuffle these top ones, the other right in, I want to maintain at the bottom. So I'll go to edit and I'm going to go in, and this is a little hidden world. The answer option has a pencil. So this is more functionality just related to that answer option. And if I go into one of the selections was be fixed. So this is the edit for the option just for this one answer option. I'm going to fix that position and then I'll save it. And then as we go through the survey, so it'll be good. We'll see if it works. So other write-in stays there. And if I go through it again, it should be staying in that position. So I told it to be stuck there, kind of at the bottom. So that's how you would set that up. And this is actually a good segue because this is one of the things I wanted to cover after I kind of go through the task list of items to cover. Is there's so much that you can do within just a basic question that it's amazing in our system. Under the layout tab, under the answer option, all the things that you can do to really customize even a basic question like a radio button. So depending on time, I hope to cover that in the last 5 or 10 minutes. Hopefully that answered your question there. Okay, I'll move on to survey links and all the different links that we generate and all the different links that can be used for testing and sharing. So in the lens of links, so one of them is that we generate is a test link. So if I am in the test tab and I am clicking manually test your survey, this is the same thing from the preview on the build page. Same exact thing, except this is toggled on and you can control this. You can, but by default from the test tab, this shows up as we're going to record it as a test response. And in the link, you'll see this test little text, and that's the way we flag it and record it as being a test response. This does happen on occasion. Please don't share this link out as your real link. I had calls in customer support and it's like, hey, we have 10,000 responses and they're all flagged as test. And it's like, oh, which link did you share? It's like, oh, we shared the test link, right? The data is still good. It just has a flag as test. So that's one link. The other one is under the invite others to test. So this is the ability to collaborate. And you'll see in this link, we have instead of test, it says collab. And if I share this out, so if I copy and pasted it, send it out by email to a colleague, it doesn't have to be an Alchemer user, it could be anybody. Then I open it up and you'll see it says collab. And this is where you have the ability to, someone can comment and give you feedback. And it's like, hey, I think we should have this in the survey, or there's a typo or whatever it is. So that's a link that goes out as a collaborate link. So all these two links are testing, collaboration in the build phase, testing phase before you launch it.
I would also like to speak up for the AOS library. When we do a test link, we've all asked everyone to default have the comment mode on, so that as we share surveys or whatnot, we can give each other feedback. It's kind of requested if we can.
And then Now getting into the actual, okay, let's share this out into the world type of link. So this is the primary link, the one that we generate, easiest, simplest. So things that you can do in, you can customize this primary link also by clicking here. And so this is something that you just have to be careful how you want to manage this. But one is, again, the slug, you could even leave it off. You don't have to put anything on if you choose. So you can customize it that way. And Jake, I'm not sure, I'm trying to remember if you have a domain set up, you can set up a private domain with the link to take away the text Alchemer. I wasn't sure if you have that set up or not.
I think so. I think people have requested it, so I think we have it turned on, yes.
Okay, so you can validate this really quickly when you go into the customized settings. If you're able to click this private domain, I don't have it set up on my test account, but if you have it, it's enabled. And then it'll say survey.academy of science or whatever your domain is. So when someone views the link to the survey, it gives them a sense of security. Oh, it's coming from Academy of Science, whatever the domain is. So that's another option that's nice to have. And then under the advanced tab, this is, you could set a quota. Like I only want 10 responses, maybe just reaching out and just want to get a certain feedback number. You can set the open date, the close date by default. And then the URL.
Hey, I grabbed them.
You
Sorry
can
about
put it, this is for kind of advanced users. And I actually have a deck on this that I could share with you as a kind of follow-up, what URL variables are, how to use them effectively in our system to capture data from the link. It's a value that's appended on to the URL. So these are just some examples like, hey, I would like to just put on $team equals sales onto the primary link, and we'll just have this data that we can capture, which is sales. It's a value. So this is useful if you kind of know how it works. And this is not just Alchemer specific, this URL variables, this is across the web, kind of a tool for gathering data. And this is really how marketing is used to kind of get you. When you click on the link, and you'll notice it up above, you'll see these URL variables. And it's like, how did they know that I was looking at shopping for this shirt? How did they know I was looking for this type of shirt? And then 3 weeks later, you see an ad pop up. It's all done behind the scenes with URL variables. And you click on a link for like an ad or when you're searching. But that's a whole nother topic for training, but it's there as an option to do that with the primary link. Then going down, I showed this already, kind of a tracking link, and it's really useful in the lens of, and I'm going to do this differently from Spanish or translation. Maybe this is going out to a department, like Department 1, whatever name it is. This is going to go to Department 1. And then I'm going to create another one that's going to go to Department 2. So same thing with the Spanish is I have to make sure I'm sending this link out just to Department 2 people. Just to Department 1 people will get this link. And then the benefit of using this is you don't have to ask that question in the survey for the respondent. What department are you? Well, we already know what department you are, and we send you surveys all the time, and we know the audience. So then how this plays out over time is once you start getting respondents, you've shared out Department 1 link, Department 2 link. This data starts flowing into the same survey. Then under results, I'll just kind of show this quickly, even though I don't really have data here. So I'm going into my standard report, and then the ability to filter. So I could filter off the link distribution. And I could filter, hey, for this report, I just want it to be showing the data from Department 2, across all the links that I distributed. So that's how it comes through as a data point that you can filter off of in the reports. Right? And then I think the third one that is probably most commonly used is via email campaign. And this is where you would have the contact list of the audience you're sending it to. You have their email address, you have their first name, just core information. Then you can go through the steps, and I'll just put in internal name. And there's a whole sequence of events here to create an email campaign like HubSpot or MailChimp, a light version of that, where you're managing the email, sending out the invitation to take the survey. So this is the message for, hey, please take the survey. And this is all kind of filler text, but this is the link to the survey. And you would kind of customize this. This is the beginning message. And then you add a reminder, which is good practice. Hey, 3 days later, if you haven't taken the survey, you haven't clicked on the link, we will automatically track you, and we'll send the email just to the people who need it that haven't taken the survey. So that's all done behind the scenes by us. Then there's a sequence of adding contacts. You send the campaign. There's delivery stats on the campaign. The advanced, there's under step 4, there's a really great resource, export contacts with send status. So you can get a Excel sheet showing in the columns the status. Did someone click on this link? And it's a specific link generated for each person that's trackable. And you'll know who hasn't engaged with the email as far as clicking on the link for the survey. So it's really good data in the campaign. So I know I did this really fast, but this is a great tool if you have that audience list you want to send it to directly. And then you can really track the engagement level of the campaign. So we do have a lot of other options here for sharing. With some tech support, you could put it on your survey, embed it. So there's quite a few here, but the other one's nice is a QR code. If you're maybe at an event and we would love your feedback, and you print this out, display it, and people can go by on their phone and just take the survey really quickly off their device. That's a nice use case for it. And you can do the same thing with these tracking links. So if I go into, I just want to do this one through a QR code, I can go into share and I can grab a QR code just for that specific custom tracking link. If it's, I want to create a custom tracking link for this one event that I'm going to be at in person that's different than all the other events, I'm just going to flag it as this link is only for this event, and then I'll print a QR code just for that specific event. So that's another option there too. Any other questions about distribution, or maybe any challenges you've encountered or use cases that I'd be happy to answer for you?
I think we covered this before, but if in the last set of trainings, but we had a person that did send out a test link, and you can get some really random test responses that are like lyrics to was it a poem or something, Jake? Do you remember that showing up? I didn't want people to be aware of that, but that is not like a spam attempt or like Alchemer glitching, that's normal.
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. So I'll just show you. So if you have an open text question, geez, why do I keep picking that? So I'll put an essay, and it's like, how do you feel? Just tell us, save. And then if you go into the test tab and click automatically generate test data, which is nice to do to see the data in aggregate, how it will come out in the reports and exports as a validation that it will meet your needs. So if I click generate, then we're going through and pretending to be 10 respondents, boop, 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 and filling in this fake data. And as Elizabeth mentioned, the open text is like, wait a second, what is in there? So I'll go to results and just individual, actually, I can go to reports to see it in aggregate, and I'll open it up. And the open text comes through as Alice in Wonderland text. I think we chose it because it's in the public domain and we can pull it. So this is all text from Alice in Wonderland that we auto generate just to have something to fill. So yes, it does look a little crazy when you start reading it, for sure. So, but again, that's from the test tab, auto generate. And just to kind of go down that path, it's like, hey, I built this survey and I chose these questions, and this is the output I want. And I would like to have this report shareable. You know, I want to go to the share report and send it out to someone as a stakeholder. And I just want to validate this quickly. Does this work? Yep. These are all default and I can customize it, but just at first glance, this is okay. This is really good. I'm happy with that. Then that's one test. This is the main test. Go to the share link, go to view, test it yourself from the live link. Make sure it's good, especially if you add logic or if there's anything unusual or advanced, check it out. Like really test it well from the live link. Then before you launch it, and then the other thing is check your comments, right? And I didn't actually go through that path, but when you share that collaborative link, please provide comments. If you have the view settings applied where it says question comments, they will appear here in a gray banner. It'll say comments. And you click to expand it and you'll see the feedback from your colleagues about, improvements, or they're happy with it. So all these things are in this testing phase. Then you're like, okay, this survey is ready to go. Now I'll go to results and individual responses. And I will get rid of all this data because this is test data. If I test it from the live link, the share link, it would show up as not a test. It would be a new response, like a real response according to our system. Doesn't matter. It's all test data. I click here, trash. Boop. Now the data is kind of zeroed out as far as the results. Then it's like, great, let me go. I'm gonna start sharing the survey out. I'll grab the link or I'll do my tracking link or however I'm gonna do it. And then I don't have to worry about filtering out the data after the fact. Like, gosh, what was that? Was that a real test response or not? Kind of thing. So that's just kind of the flow of that process before launching or recommended. So the other, if there's any questions on related to distribution, I'll just pause there.
I
Okay.
would just recommend making everyone in your IT department aware of all the distribution methods, not just for surveying, but for any other product within your health department, because I get a lot of calls and they're not aware of all the various methods.
Okay, the last thing on the list was advanced question types, and just kind of a preview of those. So just to show you from the perspective, I'm going to add a question type maybe I haven't used before, and I want to see what it can do. So I'm going to add a new question and select here. So as you go through, and I was looking at your account, and Elizabeth, you mentioned this. I know that you mentioned there's professional licenses. So when I'm showing this, there's 3 license levels in our plan: collaborator, professional, and full access. So professional is kind of in the middle zone. What I'm showing is a full access license. There's no lock symbols next to these questions. If you're going into your account and you're going and scrolling down to think about adding an advanced question, if you see the lock symbol, that means based on your license level professional, you don't have access to that kind of advanced functionality of one of these advanced questions. Okay. And I just pulled this up from our main marketing website, our landing page. So these are some of the advanced questions that aren't available in the professional license. So, the max diff, a lot of these are marketing related: semantic differential, conjoint, audio, video sentiments. A lot of these are related to marketing, image heat map. So these are the ones that, if you have a professional license, won't be available to you. So I want to focus on a couple of the advanced question types that should be available for professional, or you shouldn't see a lock symbol, which are kind of here at the bottom. And I wanted to show this, but I'm going to show you a different thing I'm going to share and share with you. So to learn about them, we have the sandbox question type cheat sheet. I might have covered this in the last training, but it's kind of a good refresher. And it's like, hey, specialty questions, or, maybe something like, oh, what does a file upload do? And it's like, you click this and the respondent can upload a picture or a PDF. These are some that aren't available for full access, but you can kind of play with it and see it and experience it in a sandbox experience way. But I wanted to share this with you. So I built this in a survey. It has no validation applied, so you can skim through it quickly to kind of experience these questions. So I'm going to go back and just start from kind of the intermediate. These are pages. The first page is basic questions, which are pretty standard. But you can go in and kind of experiment with this and just see what they do. Oh, it's a slider. People drag and drop. Star rating grid. So you can kind of get the feel for what these questions do if you haven't used it before. Then, just as a best practice, if you're starting to go down that path and it's like, hey, I would like to try one of these more advanced questions, be mindful of the end when you're picking these questions to have as your data source or display to respondent. So in this survey, and actually, let me just do this right now because I don't want to forget. So let me go back and just share this in the chat, and maybe you could follow along if you have a second screen. So I'm going to just paste this in. I think I can in the chat stream. So hopefully you can access that. I just put it in the meeting chat, that link. And if I go in and what, I'm curious about this drag and drop ranking. It's kind of interactive. I think that'd be really interesting way to get people to pick what's their number one thing, right? So if you click this drag and drop ranking hyperlink, it goes right to the associated document. How is that going to come out in the output? We have a jump link for reporting. And then it will look like this in the standard report for that drag and drop. In the distribution, the number one thing that shows up most commonly in this example is yellow. Okay, so yeah, that's good. I think that would be acceptable to me at the end. And the other thing is to think about if there's a fair number of people taking it on a mobile phone. It's like as soon as you start getting to these advanced questions, we're going to reformat the look and the interaction of that question because of the screen size. So go to survey taking, and this is desktop, but then it's like, how is that going to show on a mobile device? It's not drag and drop, it's a click, select, pick. So that's just kind of that workflow to think and be aware of the output considerations for respondents and for the data when you start to go down that path of picking more advanced question types. So you can play with these, likelihood scale, number percent, image select is nice. You upload images in the file library and you source them and insert them in. Hey, what do you like best? Image heat map, I think that's one that's restricted for professional. Drop down menu list, continuous sum is nice. You can add, maybe there's a budget consideration. So in this survey question, you can say, where would you spend and this $10,000? Where would you allocate these funds? And you're kind of forcing people to make decisions of, okay, I'll put 10,000, I put 5,000 towards this topic, 2,000 to that. So then it forces them to add up that 100%. So for certain questions, it's really good. Text box list, kind of grouping lots of text boxes together. some of the ones that are available for you, for professional specifically, that are coming up, cascading dropdown is nice. So again, it's a really unique use case, but it's really great if you have that particular thing. And like I was thinking about, maybe it's county, then it's health department inside the county, if there's like multiple. And I've seen this with school districts across a state. So the first drop down is state. In this example, it's a car brand. So it's Honda, but replace this mentally with state. And then it's, hey, what district in the state? Pick the district. And then you're drilling down what school. So all this is done with a sheet. So it's a little bit of a different interface to build this question. In the documentation, it's formatted. You have to format a CSV Excel sheet in this really particular way. Then you upload it into the question type, and then it's going to generate this. This is a column header. This is a column header, and you have to kind of do a mapping process in the sheet. But it's a really good tool. If you need that kind of drill down effect, just be mindful of this. If you do choose it, it's recommended to kind of let it go during the survey run. It's not one that's really flexible as far as changing or tweaking it on the fly like our other question types are. I know our time is running a little bit short. One thing I did want to show is this custom group question. So essentially what you can do with this custom group, and this to me is really about display for the respondent, because you're essentially taking different question types and you can really manipulate the location of how they're displayed in this group effect. So it looks like it's connected. There's no lines in between. You can position it. So it's a lot of questions that could be relating to one particular topic. So there's a way to really make it look nice for a respondent, for style perspective. And the other thing, and this is all in the documentation, you can add another for the respondent. So maybe there's, this is in this example, let's say I'm going to do one trip and I got another trip. So I'm going to add another set of data. So you can set that for a respondent to be dynamic, to kind of repeat and add. Another one's a custom table. And this is, I think, good for, there's something that's associated like a data point, like a number. And it's like a custom group, but it's really in this grid format. And the types of questions that you can pick in the columns to be displayed aren't as, you don't have as much variety. It's a little more restricted. But for certain type of questions, again, it's a very unique use case, but it could be helpful if you have like, hey, here's Health Department 1, Health Department 2, Health Department 3, what's the name, what's the drop down pick, so lots of options there in this kind of grid type of format. And again, this is really good to check in the output. It's like, how is it going to come out in the data? And I'll look at the reporting, and it's going to come out, in this format. So again, just that path of just double checking to make sure you are comfortable with it. And again, this is just a preview of what it's looking like. The best practice is, if I do choose to use it, let me actually put in some test data. Let me go through it and test it myself. And I really want to validate it and run the export, look at the standard report. Then I'm really confident I can handle this data the way this is going to meet my needs on the output. I'm sorry, we're a little bit past time. I just wanted a little bit open-ended questions. I apologize. I didn't get to the kind of the layout and customization of basic questions. I'll try to cover that maybe our next stream. But any last questions on some of the things I was sharing?
Oh, you're muted, Jake.
We do not have any questions. If anyone wants to type any in, I think we're good. Thank you, Mike. This has been training number 2 of the National iOS Group. We'll send out the recording and also shared in our statewide group. So thanks for coming in, Mike.
Oh, thank you, Jake. It was nice spending time with everyone today, and
Thank you,
look forward to our next training. Thanks, Elizabeth.
The final training will be on April 25th and focus in on reporting mostly, right?
Yes, the output. Yes.
April 25th, if you can see it on your calendars, it's 1 p.m. Eastern. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.